We are getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
There are some puzzling developments tonight in the ongoing search for Nancy Guthrie.
They told you this was a local story, a missing grandmother, a sun-baked Tucson neighborhood, search dogs, flyers, prayers. They were wrong, because the moment that anonymous call came in, the moment a voice from across the border whispered coordinates into an encrypted line, this story stopped being local. It went international, and it got dangerous. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, retired, a woman who had lived her entire life inside the same city, inside the same routines, inside the same quiet Tucson neighborhood she called home for decades. She didn't go hiking. She didn't travel alone. She had a pacemaker. And yet, she vanished. The mainstream narrative said she never left Arizona. Investigators worked the perimeter, local sex offender registries, nearby desert trails, known transit camps, standard protocol. But standard protocol had a massive blind spot because 64 miles south of Tucson, in the border city of Nogales, Sonora, Mexico, someone already knew exactly where she was. The call came through an encrypted relay channel, the kind of line that bounces a signal through 3 countries before landing anywhere traceable. The whistleblower provided no name, no affiliation, just coordinates, precise, surgical, northwest of the city, a ravine near the Mariposa stream corridor, an unmarked grave, hidden beneath desert scrub, covered in loose sediment. Within hours, a volunteer search collective called Buscando Corazones Nogales, an organization that has recovered more bodies in this region than any official agency, mobilized alongside Mexican state security forces. They weren't looking for a runaway. They were looking for a crime scene. And before we go any further, if you have been following this case, you already feel in your gut something about this tip was either the break that cracked everything open, or it was a deliberate distraction engineered to send investigators in exactly the wrong direction. I want your theory in the comments right now. And if you are not subscribed, hit that button. Turn on notifications. Because what search teams found when they started digging at those coordinates is going to change how you see this entire case. Let's talk about the Mariposa corridor. This is not some forgotten patch of desert. This is a killing field. 25 unmarked graves uncovered in the Mariposa region this year alone. Bodies wrapped in plastic. Bodies buried in layers. Bodies that belong to people whose families are still waiting for a phone call. This is the operating ground of organized trafficking cells. Sophisticated, compartmentalized, brutal. And here's what that tells us immediately about the Nancy Guthrie case. A lone actor doesn't move an 84-year-old woman across one of the most surveilled border corridors in the Western Hemisphere. You don't improvise that. You don't wing it. You need vehicles with border crossing credentials. You need a route that avoids thermal drone sweeps. You need someone who has done this before, someone embedded in the infrastructure of organized crime. This was not a crime of passion. This was a contracted operation. Now, the timeline. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker monitoring system registered a disruption, not a cardiac event, a disruption, the kind consistent with physical trauma or rapid positional change. That timestamp is everything. It is the last digital fingerprint Nancy left on U.S. soil, and the location of that unmarked grave above a desert stream bed was not chosen randomly. Forensic hydrologists understand this immediately. Shallow burial above a seasonal water source is calculated degradation. When water moves through that soil, it strips secondary DNA. It disperses trace evidence. It destroys a forensic chain before investigators can build it. Whoever chose that location had either done this before or had been coached by someone who had. But here's where the machinery of justice ground to a halt. Pima County Sheriff's Office, the primary agency on Nancy's disappearance, received no formal notification from Mexican authorities about the anonymous tip. None. The coordinates were shared with Mexican state forces. The volunteer collective was already in the field, and the American agency most responsible for finding Nancy Guthrie was sitting in the dark. No joint task force briefing. No cross-border coordination call. Institutional paralysis. At the exact moment when every hour counted, But while the bureaucracies failed each other, federal cyber analysts were already building something. A map, a digital map of ransom trails, encrypted wallets, and satellite communication nodes that was about to point a very direct arrow at a very specific person. When federal investigators pulled the ransom communications, the encrypted notes delivered in the 48 hours after Nancy's disappearance, they weren't working with handwriting. They were working with code, cryptocurrency, routed through layered relay servers designed to bounce the signal until it disappeared. Except it didn't disappear, because federal cyber analysts are very, very good at their jobs. The routing architecture traced back to encrypted relay nodes anchored in northern Mexico, nodes that have been flagged in 2 prior cartel-adjacent extortion cases, both unresolved, both originating in the Sonoran corridor. The financial fingerprints matched. But here's what the crypto trail alone couldn't explain. How did they know Nancy's schedule? How did they know the layout of her home? How did they know which night she was alone? The answer lives inside what investigators now call the insider threat model. Before any trafficking cell takes operational risk on a high-profile target, they need surveillance, ground-level intelligence, someone inside the perimeter, a face that belongs, a face that Nancy had no reason to distrust. Investigators began cross-referencing service records. Anyone who had entered Nancy's residence in the 90 days prior to her disappearance. Utility workers, medical visitors, contractors. The list narrowed fast. Meanwhile, the FBI's Phoenix field office authorized a multi-tool aerial deployment over the Mariposa stream coordinates. Advanced satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar calibrated for soil disturbance detection, thermal variance mapping, the technology used to find IEDs in active war zones, now being pointed at the Sonoran Desert to find one missing grandmother. The radar results came back with an anomaly, a subsurface density inconsistency, approximately 6 feet below grade, dimensions consistent with a burial. The teams marked the site, and they waited for backup, but they didn't have to wait long, because at a border checkpoint, at 3:42 in the morning, automated cameras caught something that blew the entire case wide open. 3:42 a.m., 1 hour and 14 minutes after Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker went silent, a commercial utility vehicle rolls up to a border crossing south of Tucson. Heavily tinted windows, no markings, moving at normal speed, behaving like a vehicle that crosses this checkpoint regularly. U.S. Customs and Border Protection's automated license plate readers log it in 0.3 seconds. The thermal imaging mounted above the lane tells a different story. In the rear cargo bed, beneath a layered tarp, thermal cameras detect a large, dense mass, radiating heat, not cargo, not equipment, a mass consistent with a human body. Federal investigators, when they pull the footage 36 hours later, go completely still. Because here's what they know. The vehicle's registration links to a licensed home improvement and property maintenance contractor based out of Tucson, Arizona. A contractor with a documented service history. A contractor whose company records show a visit to Nancy Guthrie's residence exactly 3 weeks before her disappearance. His invoice said, routine maintenance inspection. What he was actually doing, mapping the property, documenting entry points, logging her daily patterns. A surveillance run disguised as a service call. When investigators pull his telecommunications data, they find a secondary device. A hidden line, not registered in his name, not linked to his business. This phone pings off encrypted Mexican satellite relays. The billing architecture leads back to a single bank account. He was not a low-level errand runner. He was the inside man, the logistics anchor, the human bridge between a quiet Tucson neighborhood and an organized trafficking cell operating out of northern Mexico. And he had been invisible until 3:42 a.m. gave him away. The FBI now had a name. They had a vehicle. They had a phone. And they had coordinates. All that was left was the door. And they were about to knock it down. The operation was coordinated across 2 countries in less than 72 hours. FBI Phoenix Field Office, Mexican Federal Forces, a joint entry team with one target. A fortified compound located past the Mariposa port of entry, deep inside the corridor. Off-road, deliberate, The kind of structure that doesn't appear on commercial maps. At first light, the compound door came down. The contractor, the man whose face Nancy Guthrie had trusted in her own home, was found inside. 3 additional members of the trafficking cell were apprehended on the compound grounds. All 4 taken into federal custody without incident. But the physical evidence recovered from that property, that's what sealed it. Inside a utility vehicle, the same vehicle that crossed the checkpoint at 3:42 a.m., forensic technicians located a discarded section of medical-grade wiring. Thin, coated, specific, the kind of wiring found in cardiac pacemaker monitoring units. It had been cut, and it was stained. DNA analysis returned a singular, unshakable match. Nancy Guthrie. Under federal interrogation, the contractor broke. He admitted that the anonymous tip to Mexico, the encrypted call, the coordinates, the whistleblower narrative was engineered. A geopolitical smokescreen designed to flood the investigation with international noise, to split agency attention across 2 countries, to buy time while the extortion demand was still in play. He had not expected the thermal imaging. He had not expected the encrypted phone to be traced. He had not expected a retired grandmother's pacemaker wired to survive. But it did. Federal indictments came down fast and without mercy. International kidnapping, extortion, first-degree felony murder. Every charge filed, every name attached. The 4 men who conspired to treat an 84-year-old woman as a transaction, as an asset to be moved, leveraged, and disposed of, will face the full weight of federal prosecution built on digital forensics, thermal imaging, DNA evidence, and their own catastrophic arrogance. Nancy Guthrie spent 84 years building a life inside one city. She deserved to grow old in it. She deserved safety inside her own home. She deserved to be more than a case number. And because of the thermal camera, a pacemaker wire, and the kind of investigative patience that does not quit, she got justice. This case is far from over in the courts. But the truth is already out. If this case moved you, if you want us to keep digging into cases like this, subscribe right now. Drop your questions and theories in the comments below. We read every single one, and we're already working on the next case. Stay locked in.